welcome along to another episode of your favorite podcast.
The most popular podcast on the south side of Nacogdoches.
That's right. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Okay, yeah, that's good.
Really so.
Yeah. Well, thanks for listening. We're super glad you're here. I want to give a special shout out this podcast today, this Tuesday, that you are listening, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Should be, hopefully. Everybody listens exactly when they come out.
That's
so,
right.
Yeah.
That's right. We got a friend of the pod, and this was an in-person shout out. So this person saw me in a hallway, and it wasn't like scary waiting in a back alley, dimly lit hallway.
It's just the office.
No, it's just the office. And said, "Hey, I have listened to a bunch of episodes today, and am about to kind of make my way all the way through." So, friend of the pod, Emma Goebel. What's up, Emma? Thanks for listening. Hope you are enjoying your binging of the pod. We're hearing that a little bit, that people are starting in some random spot, and then they're
really realizing how great this podcast is, and going back and catching up on the episodes.
That's right. That's right. Well, thanks for listening. And today is
I think Emma's going to like the one today.
Okay, I think she is too, because today is in the history of the podcast, which is we're talking about a long time.
Nearly 50 episodes.
Nearly 50 episodes.
This is 48.
You know, we sent out, we always do, we say, you know, who do you want us to interview? And Blake kind of did a little bit of an online poll not too long ago.
Yeah.
Who do you want us to interview? And we have for you today the most requested
by far
interview. By far. No one else is even close. It's a landslide victory. We have the most requested guest in the studio with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are interviewing Maddison Duty. She's already giggling. Who knows how this podcast will go? Stick around for this episode. Thanks for listening. All right. Well, I said we've got the most requested individual in Sweet Tea and Coffee podcast history. I almost forgot
the name of this show.
Yeah. So I don't know. Let's start there. Well, first of all, welcome, Maddison. Thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy day to spend time with us. But what does that feel like to be the most requested interview? How do you feel? It's like we're giving you the trophy.
I'm a mix of honored and sure that someone has like stuffed the ballot box.
Oh,
I mean, there may have been a little bit of that. The very first one that came in said, "You need to interview that redheaded girl that sings on stage." So
we counted that towards you.
Yeah, we assumed
we
that was you.
They didn't name
me.
you by name, but we counted that towards you. That's so funny. Well, yeah, that's pretty cool. So a lot of people want to hear from you, hear your story. You've been in Nacogdoches now for a little while. So we like to start just with everybody kind of going, okay, how did your journey evolve and bring you here? Where'd you grow up? What was life like as a kid? And how did you make your way to Nacogdoches?
So I moved a lot when I was little, but in about middle school, we moved to Plano, Texas. And so that's basically where I grew up. And then I decided that I needed to go to college and didn't know where to go.
Did you decide, or were you told you needed to go to college?
Well, I don't really know. I was telling somebody the other day that I don't really remember a conversation with my parents where they said like, okay, like, what do you want to do with your life? Do you need to go to college or do you want to go to college? And so I don't know. I just kind of assumed that I was going.
It's just what I got to do.
Yeah. And then two of my cousins went to SFA, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. So I was like, oh, I'll just go where they are. I was like, Matthew's still there, so I'll just go where he is.
So Cousin Matthew.
Cousin Matthew.
At SFA.
Yes.
Shout out to Cousin Matthew.
Yeah. Yes. So I came to Nacogdoches, had no clue. I didn't even come to visit the school. I just...
I've heard these type of stories a lot with SFA. It's like they just accidentally come to SFA. I don't know what the deal is with that. But.
Yeah, I don't know. I just
knew.
Yeah, I guess so. But then when I got here, I was not so sure anymore.
I've heard that too.
Yeah, the whole first semester, I was just like, I don't know if I should do this, but mostly just because I didn't make friends very quickly. Like I had a couple, but making friends is hard. And so I had a really hard time and was like determined I didn't want to be a quitter, but I was also like, if this goes on much longer, I'm going to leave.
Right. Was it a homeschool? I mean, not homeschool. What am I saying? Homesick. We homeschool. Maybe that's on the brain. Was it a homesick thing, or was it more just, man, this may not be the right spot for me?
Maybe a mixture of both. I had some good friends back home, and I loved going home to visit them. Some of them weren't in college, but I think I was just uncomfortable in all the new and wasn't sure how to handle it. And so, yeah.
So what changed? I mean, you'd been here, you said that went on for a little over a year. What shifted and changed?
Well, it was just the first semester of school. I was enjoying college. I kind of liked some of the aspects of being on my own. I was going home every other weekend, but I met a guy named Jason Sperlin. He was on the podcast.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
I met Jason.
Hey, Jason.
And he invited me to the BSM. It was like the end of the semester. And he invited me to Thanksgiving karaoke at the BSM. And yeah.
That's two things you don't normally hear together.
And
that's right. So true.
Yeah, it was a big thing. I don't like karaoke, but I was like, I'll go. Like, I didn't know there were Christian groups on campus. That's cool. I didn't
Much
really know.
Much less karaokeing.
Right.
Christian groups.
I did not participate. But anyways, I showed up at the BSM and I was looking around at all these people who supposedly loved the Lord. And I was just like, this is so cool. Like, it's like a youth group for college students.
Yeah.
I was like, this is so neat. I didn't really know that Christians went to college. So here we are.
Yeah. So then I don't know, like that's interesting. You accepted an invitation to the BSM. Does that mean that coming into school, you would have called yourself a Christian at that point? Would you have been like, where would your faith have been at that point that you would even accept an invitation like that?
Yeah. So my family, like I grew up in church sort of when we moved a lot when I was little, and we weren't really in church or going to church, during that time, but, we prayed together as a family and I was raised with like all the typical Christian morals. So I was a Christian or whatever. Yeah. But I just didn't really know that there was anything outside of going to church.
Yeah.
Like on Wednesdays or Sundays.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to find friends or community.
Yeah, that's interesting. I had this conversation actually with Nathan Dutton, who's been on the podcast. He's our student pastor, and we talked about how important it is for people to, especially like for a senior in high school, to see someone in the next stage of their life, which would be like somebody in college actually pursuing Jesus, to be able to imagine, kind of get their imaginations full of what it might look like to be a follower of Christ in that next stage. And it sounds like you're kind of describing a similar sort of light bulb where you go to the BSM and you're around people that are just like you in the same season of life, but that are pursuing Jesus in a way that was more outside the box than what you had maybe imagined, like the Sunday, Wednesday thing. This was more of a whole life thing. And is that kind of what you are describing?
Yeah, I think so. I was shocked, really. Yeah. My church back home was pretty lukewarm. In my perspective, I just kind of like, we went to church and I didn't really, I don't know. And maybe that's more hindsight than me seeing that in the moment. But I really didn't know what could have been. And so when I met all these people who were like openly just like, I love the Lord, and like talking about all the things that the Lord has done in their life, I was like, I don't really have conversations like this. This is cool.
So how did that impact you from that moment going forward?
Well, so that was like at the end of the first semester of college, and I went home shortly after that, and my life turned around over that Christmas break. I was saved when I was 13, but it was kind of I realized I don't want to go to hell, like kind of, I don't know if I've made this decision.
Yeah.
But this Christmas break, I was home, and I was still just like very internally wrestling with sin and like just trapped in it. And I had kind of given up, thinking like, this is just how my life is. I'm going to just struggle. And over that Christmas break, somebody came to speak to us on just like a Wednesday night. It was the Wednesday night right before I came back to school. And this guy, it was a guest preacher. Nobody knew who he was. Our pastor had met him that day and let him come and speak.
Wow.
It was weird. But I was sitting there like not really paying attention, and this guy, like, I just felt like he was looking at me. I was like, what is happening? And in the middle of whatever he was talking about, he stops and he looks right at me and he says, "You are not worthless." And then he keeps going. And I lost it. I'm just crying and like mentally just like spiraling. I was like, what?
Because at this point, you'd kind of given up.
Yeah. And not necessarily given up on my faith, just like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how to get out of all these habits that I've like formed. And so I'm sitting there and I'm just like, I'm not okay. I'm not worthless. And like the Lord just kind of started bringing up just all the things that I had been processing and my sin. And I was like, God, I've tried so many times to hand all this over to you, but I can't. Like it just all comes rushing back. And he was like, exactly. Like, you're trying to do this.
Wow.
He's like, I care for you, and like, I can do this. Just like, give it to me. And so I'm praying and I'm trying to like lay it all down, but still part of me is like, I don't really know if this is going to work. Like, I've done this a million times. And the guy who was speaking started calling people up for prayer, and a couple of people went up, and then he asked again, and I still don't go up. And he asked again. He just kept asking. He probably asked like 5 or 6 times for people to come up, and I was like, fine. And so like I got up there and I like fell to my knees, and the Lord just kind of washed over me, and like my uncle came up and was praying for me, and it was really sweet. And the Lord was just like, this is the end of that life, and like we're going to move forward. And that moment like propelled me back into college, where I made this new community that he had just, like, the Lord had just barely planted it, but I came back knowing where I was going to go and where I was going to invest myself and the people that I was going to surround myself with. It was really cool. Wow.
So that's incredible. I actually had a bit of a similar story, but I didn't have this immediate change. It was, but I remember I was a senior in high school. I remember being, and the same deal, just really, really, really struggling. And the same deal, like a guest preacher. And I mean, there's so many similarities. And but for the first time, this guy was talking about, I'd never heard this before. This guy was talking about the power of the Holy Spirit, and that we cannot overcome sin on our own. We're not equipped with that kind of power. And he was talking about living from a very different place than I'd ever lived the Christian life. I'd always lived the Christian life through self-effort. Right. And he was talking about living it from a place of surrender, from peace, from the abiding power of God. And like, I'd never heard that before, and threw myself into that. Just like, okay, this is different. But I didn't have any idea how to live that out after that moment. So I actually had a gap of several years of feeling like, kind of reverting back to a self-help sort of Christianity and trying to do it on my own again, all the while knowing I'd surrender this to the Lord. But what does that look like in the meantime? And so freedom for me didn't come until several years later, when it really started to click what it means to actually day in and day out in the practice of surrender, to how to live that out. It wasn't just this one-time thing. It was, how do I live that way? And I had to learn that. So it's really interesting. But for you, community was a big part of maintaining freedom. I mean, you just jumped right back in and started hanging out with the people that you had just barely met, and that ended up being transformative and life-changing for you, right?
Yeah. It was huge. I didn't know these people, but I was like, these people are going to care for me. Somehow I knew, and they did. Like, I just showed up and people started asking me about my life, and like I jumped right into going on a mission trip with the BSM. Like, I walked in, didn't know anybody in the building, and just kind of wrote my name on the piece of paper.
I'm going to sign up for all the things.
Yeah. But it was kind of through that process, like the training for this mission trip, that I was taught to share my testimony. And that was really hard because I had just like walked out of some stuff, but every week for like 5 or 6 weeks, they were like, all right, find a partner, sit down and share your testimony. And I was like, ooh. But every time I did, I felt lighter. And
wow.
It was, and then it wasn't just like the person across from me just kind of nodded and told their story. Like, these people would respond to me and like encourage me, and like, because they were hearing that I had just kind of walked out of some things. And so I don't know, it was really cool. I was like, I know that this is where I need to be.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, and that continues to grow, right? I mean, you don't just move through your years at SFA there, you get really involved in the BSM. How does that journey evolve?
Yeah, there was kind of no turning back at that point. I was like, I love this place.
You'd already signed up for all the things.
Yeah. Signed up to be on the leadership team for the next year. But yeah, I served on their leadership team at the BSM for the next 4 years, and then post-college started working there. But BSM for life.
How did you, are you at that point, as you're involved in leadership, involved on staff, what are you processing in terms of, God, what do you want me to do with my life? And what's going on in your heart and mind there?
During college, I didn't really ask that question very much.
What were you studying?
I should have hospitality administration.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I went in undecided because obviously I didn't know. I was sort of undecided. I put myself down as a history major because I didn't want to admit that I was undecided.
What?
Yeah, and I took some history classes and it was cool.
Yeah,
but I was like, I don't want to be a teacher. So
yeah, I did the same thing because I did explore history and thought I could do this.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know if I want to teach history. That's pretty much all you can do with that degree.
Right.
I just want to play music.
Just want to play music. I'm going to be a rock star.
Yeah. So I met somebody who was a hospitality major, and I was like, that sounds cool. It's like restaurant management, hotel management, travel and tourism. And I was like, that sounds really neat. I'll pick that. And then didn't really think about what I was going to do with that until my senior year, probably. I started telling people I wanted to be a travel agent. I was like, I'll just plan people's vacations for them. That sounds cool. But still really didn't have any dreams or desires to like that backed that up. I just kind of was hoping the Lord would tell me when it was time. And my senior year, we're in like the last semester. I'm like, okay, God, like, what am I doing? And I was actually serving my internship here at the church. I somehow managed to convince them to let me do an internship with Becky, working on the Haiti like mission trips and stuff. But I really just ended up doing children's ministry things with her and helped her like plan a little bit of her Haiti mission trip. But anyways, I did that, and I
forgot about that.
Yeah. I was here. Whenever I was here, I was seeing you guys interact and seeing like just what it was like working in a church and in ministry. And I was like, this is so cool. I was like, I I love this. Like, this is such an encouraging environment. This is so cool. And that, I remember thinking like, man, it'd be really cool to work here. But didn't see a place for me, but knew that there were opportunities to go and work at the BSM after college. And I was like, okay, I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make this decision. And so I applied to work there, and the Lord very graciously confirmed it in a few different ways, just giving me a lot of peace. And so I ended up working there for the next 4 years, which was awesome. It was hard. Every year was kind of a new, I need to check in with the Lord and see. There was always kind of an unsure aspect to it. I kept wanting the Lord to just tell me this is where I'm going to be forever. I was like, I love the BSM. Like, I want to invest in people the way that people invested in me here. But for some reason, every year in the spring, I was having to check in and say, okay, Lord, like, do I stay? And he'd be like, 1 more year, check back in. Maybe not in those clear terms, but that's kind of how I don't know. That's how it went for 4 years.
So you were for 4 years. You're going basically year to year, just going. Okay, I want to be where the Lord has put me, and but I don't want to hold on to that too tightly. Don't want to be just maintaining safety. I want to be where God has put me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so the first 2 years, I was like, this is where I'm going to be forever, and then in the third year working there, my dad passed away, and I started questioning everything. I kind of like just lost sight of a lot of things, and I was like, I don't know anymore. I was like, my future all of a sudden, even though my future wasn't wrapped up in my dad, like I felt like my future just became this big question mark. And I was like, I don't know what to do from here. But I kind of stayed where I was at because I didn't know what else to do. And obviously still loved the BSM, but.
Yeah, wow. That's a massive bump in the road. Yeah. That's a quite the unexpected moment. That was your third year, so you'd graduated. You were about to start your third year. Is that right?
I think so.
At the BSM?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yes.
Man, so that goes down. Totally shocking, totally unexpected. Mm-hmm. And man, what goes on in your world from that point? I imagine that's incredibly jarring. Yeah.
It really felt like in some ways everything halted. Like I felt like my mind was wiped. It was January of 2019 and the semester was about to begin. And I was actually, I was struggling that last like 5 or 6 months before that. I was like, my best friend had just moved to Mississippi and I had started support raising my salary. And that was really, really tough, on me. And I don't want to use the word depressed because I don't know for sure, but there were lots of moments where I was like, I'm not doing well. And so I had been going to counseling for that. And then my dad passed away and I was like, oh, like I was already kind of in a rough place. And like I had been that night, actually, I was in my room and I was very poorly playing the guitar and just trying to sing like worship songs. I was like, I have never felt this low before. I was like, gosh, what is going on? And like, why? Like I was imagining myself singing and encouraging other people. I just reread that in my journal not too long ago. I had been like imagining myself like trying to encourage other people who were going through something really hard. But then I was also feeling really guilty for picturing myself in that way because I was in such a like uncomfortable and like dark place. And then like while that's happening, like I get this call and I was like, oh,
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it kind of, everything just froze for a little bit. The hardest part though, is that things don't stop. And I think that's what I wrestled with for a really long time was that life is still going, even though I feel like it should have stopped.
Yeah. Well, I remember that day. I remember that phone call, and that Gary Davis had, who's the BSM director and was your boss at the time, had thrown you in the car, and y'all were off back home to see to be with your family after you'd received the news. And as you and I talked about it in days and weeks and months that would follow, one of the things that really stood out to me in that story was there were a couple of people that came kind of out of the woodwork a little bit to be there for you, to do the little things. And one story, it just in particular that I remember, I'd love for you to share was you had a friend that as you and your family are making preparations, she just shows up and starts cleaning and starts like doing things around the house. Talk a little bit about, maybe share that story, but talk a little bit about in the moments where you just feel like, you're just completely numb. You feel like you're just totally flattened. Life is over. What it's like to look around and see people like that picking up the pieces and walking with you in those difficult moments.
Yeah. I'll give you some context for what I was feeling. I kind of felt a mixture of nothing and sadness, obviously. Yeah. Like, I just was so sad.
Yeah.
And then numb. But I wasn't angry. I didn't have questions. I just was sad.
Yeah.
And so I really did. I was kind of just sitting on my couch, and people just flooded into my house. And they were just kind of circling around. But yeah, my friend Jessica from home, I wouldn't say we grew up together, but we knew each other for a long time. And she showed up and she didn't leave. Her and her sister were there the night, like when I pulled up to the house, and she spent the night every night for the next 2 weeks until I came back here. And she cleaned my room. She brought me water every 30 minutes or so. She cooked with my family. She made the slideshow for my dad's funeral. She did, there's so many things she probably did. She went and ran errands for my family and helped sort through stuff. And it was incredible. And I'm just watching her do this. I picture myself from the couch because that's really the only place that I was. And I just watching her, and even a whole day where there's a bunch of new family and people that she doesn't know that were sitting around me and with me. She would just be sitting in the kitchen. She wouldn't leave to go home or rest or anything. She just stayed. And it was jarring. It was I was like, why would you do this for me? But I'm so glad that she did. It was just kind of an anchor. This person's not going away. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's really special to me. And I think about it all the time. I'm I could never repay her. And then my uncle passed away a few months ago, and she did the same thing. She showed up while I was there with my family, and she just sat with us, and she made the slideshow for his memorial too.
Wow.
But yeah, that's just her. So many of our friends and family members just showed up and stayed and took care of everything. While everything was falling to pieces, they just took care of us. Oh,
it's a incredibly powerful picture of what community is really, what Christian community really ought to look like. And I think about, the classic story of suffering in the scriptures is a story of Job. And just so much loss and devastation.
Yeah. And
then he has friends that come and they want to talk about it. They want to figure out why, and they want to give advice, and they want to, say a lot of things. And in that moment, that's not helpful. It's not appropriate, not helpful. And I think about that, and then I think about the story you just told about. In those moments, the most powerful thing you can do is just be present. Mm-hmm. Be present and serve and be quiet, and and offer water every 30 minutes. I just think what an incredible contrasting picture from what we think people need, which is answers and words, versus in those moments what we actually need, which is just a quiet servant heart, just presence, sustained presence. I think that's a powerful picture. Well, so obviously that's no light and easy thing. I mean, that is something that you then from that moment begin to have to wrestle with and deal with. You talked about life moving on, but at the same time feeling shut down. How is God, imagine that's still a very present thing, carry you through that moment and into where you are now?
For the next, it's only been like 3 years, but so for the next like year and a half, it was very much like just the world spinning around me and me just trying to keep up. I feel like I talked about that a lot. We met a lot during that time, and I was like, I don't know what to do. I was trying really hard to grieve correctly.
Yeah. I
remember thinking that a lot and hopefully admitting that. But I was like, I want to do this right. I want to do it well. I was like, I think it was like, I just don't want to feel this for very long. That was probably the underlying emotion. But I was just so lost. And I remember there was one time that I went to meet with you, and it really helped. I think I had just probably gone on this tangent of like wanting to rest. I think you had been telling me like, you just calm down, like just rest. And like, you don't have to do anything right now. And who knows what I said, but you stopped and you were like, I'm going to leave the office for 5 minutes. And you opened your notebook, you ripped out a piece of paper and you handed it to me. And you said, I want you to imagine that you just said all of that, like that God is sitting right there. And like, imagine what he would say to you. And then you left your office.
That's a good pastor, just abandon you right there.
So naturally, I spent the next 5 minutes panicking, knowing that I was going to fail the assignment. But coming to the end of the 5 minutes, I realized there was 3 things in my head the whole time. And I was like, I guess I'll write these down because he's going to come back in a second.
Got to have something.
Yeah. And so I wrote them down. And I was really nervous to share them with you because I knew you were going to make me read them. But I think because I was like, these seem so simple. The things that I've just written down, they seem so like, duh.
Yeah.
But so I read them, and I had written on this piece of paper, stop, come to me, and I love you.
Wow.
And that was your reaction then too. And I just sat there and cried.
Wow.
And it's what I needed to hear as I realized, like, I don't have to grieve correctly. I don't have to do anything. There's not like a standard that I need to be living up to right now. I just need to go and sit with the Lord and like let him take care of me. And that was huge.
Wow.
To realize that like there's no standard of how to grieve correctly, how to get through this. Like I can just kind of stop.
Yeah. Well, so I imagine that moment really becomes, grief, it's not, we talk about it really linear, you know, like, and kind of like what you were even describing is thinking that it was as you were in it, you know, like I've started the race and I want to finish the race, and how do I do that? And it just doesn't work that way. It's not linear in many ways. It is, it's lifelong and it changes in phases and seasons. But I imagine that moment that you're describing there becomes sort of a stake in the ground for the way that the process would continue on. Yeah. How did those words, not just in the moment, but from that day even up till now, how did that moment kind of, and how has it shaped the way you've continued to walk through that grief?
I've pretty immediately felt a lot of freedom, just again to stop trying to do everything right. And for a while that was kind of hard because I stopped everything, and I lost a lot of discipline because I was just like, the Lord said I didn't have to. But like I experienced a lot of freedom in that, and realizing that like nobody's judging me for anything I'm doing or not doing right now. And I remember that often. I still have that piece of paper. It's tucked into my mirror. And I'll stop and think about it sometimes, and like and remember that I can just go to the Lord and wherever I'm at. And it's been a long journey of trying to find discipline again and figure out like what my life looks like now. I think for a while I was trying to get back to a place that felt good. Because before my dad passed away, that Maddison knew the God of forgiveness and repentance and salvation. And that's wonderful. But I didn't also know like who he was to me in heartbreak and sadness and then the questions. And I've been for the last couple of years trying to navigate like learning who he is now, like who I've experienced so much more. And I don't know, trying to see my life through the new lenses, I guess, that I've been given.
Wow. Well, and in that process too, your work world kind of changes. And that's an interesting part of I think it's a really interesting part of this story, that somewhere in there, you end up on staff here.
Yeah.
And I remember I can go back and kind of remember the point where I felt like where I started really seriously thinking about that, where we just, gosh, when we hire and when we make staff decisions, there's just so much prayer, and Lord, would you just please show us who and how, and I remember those moments of starting to think, Lord, are you calling Maddison here? And but how does that evolve for you? I mean, how do you start thinking about that? Was it when I called you? Was it just completely random? Were you shocked, or were you I mean, how did you end up here?
Well, in the summer of 2020, I had stopped working at the BSM. I had asked him around February, March. I'd sat down with the Lord and was like, okay, like, do you need me to step away? Kind of the same, like every year I had asked that question. And this time it was a resounding yes. And so I like immediately got up, went to the office and was like, all right, I gotta go. The Lord said I gotta go. And I didn't know. I kind of had this year time frame in my head where I was like, I don't know. I feel like there's a year break in here, and I don't really know what's going to happen in this year, if I'm going to come back to the BSM or what's going to happen. But I knew I was going to finish my contract and then see what happens. And so in June, I finished the contract and took a few weeks just to myself. And then I got a job at Brendan's. And just
Brendan, it all comes back to Brendan in this podcast.
Yeah, it was really sweet. I ran into him at his restaurant, and he asked if I had found a job or what I was doing. And I was like, I really don't know what I'm supposed to do right now. And he was like, well, come work for me until you figure it out. And that was a huge blessing. And so I worked there for, I don't know, 6 months or so. And that was huge for me, because I was just able to work with my hands and not really have to think about it a whole lot. And so I was able to just process my life, which was so nice. I would spend so much time cleaning those refrigerators in the back, and I was just like, this is so great. I was like, also so gross, but so great. And so we get back to the spring. It's like February, and I sit down. I was also babysitting one of my friend's kids, and I sat down with the Lord. I was like, all right, it's been about a year. Like, what am I supposed to do? And a few hours later, you called me.
No way.
Yeah.
I don't know that I've heard this part of the story.
Yeah. And you were like, hey, you want to come to the office for a brief chat? And I was like,
That does sound like something you would say.
Dun, dun.
I was like, okay. I honestly thought we had just launched the All My Hope stuff. And you had mentioned to me, like, asking if I would ever be comfortable, like, sharing my story through that avenue. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, oh, he probably wants me to talk about All My Hope or whatever. And then I show up and you just kind of lay out what you were thinking about the job. And I was shocked. But also, like, inwardly, just like, God, that's cool.
Yeah. Wow.
And there was never, well, I wouldn't say there's never a moment that I was unsure about accepting the job, but I was like, this is it. Like, this is for me. Yeah. And so.
That's cool.
Yeah. That was like a few-week process because you were like, we haven't actually, like, written out the job or anything, but just wondering if you're interested. And I was like, yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and so then I said yes.
And now here you are.
Yeah. Here I am.
You are. And you've been here now
a little over a year.
Well, that's cool. And it's cool too to see how just, for us, how that job even opened up, and the things that we needed. And part of what we needed in that job, amazingly enough, was somebody that gets hospitality.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's just so cool. I just listened to the beginning of your story and now how much you're using that here. I mean, so much of anything that's in that category of hospitality that you see here at the church has Madison's fingerprints on it. Right. And that's just so cool how the Lord would orchestrate that and that would be your degree and what you are passionate about. And also, I just, for the record, people may have missed it. You said this back a while ago. You're probably the first person, Blake, and I don't mean to throw you or I under the bus here, but she's maybe the first person that's ever called us cool. I think she did mention that this would be a cool job. We were cool people. I mean, like,
she saw us in action and thought,
and that's cool. So let's just keep that for the record. So
I still think you're cool.
First time in history and second time in history. That's good. That's good. Well, so what's that been like? I mean, how has it been? No pressure. It's just your boss saying, this is not a podcast employee review. But I mean, what's that been like to come into a new season, to be in a place where you feel like the Lord's called you? You love this community and it felt like this is where you wanted to stay and be, and then being able to kind of be in a position where the unique giftings that you have are being utilized. What's that been like?
Well, and I'll interject too.
Go ahead.
Some of the things that she's doing in this job too are outside of her normal comfort zone, and so I feel it's an interesting combination of that. How does that play into it?
Yeah,
I have so many thoughts. I feel like you just asked me so many questions.
So many questions.
Let's see. What else can I ask you? No, go ahead.
I love working here so much. I am amazed, like, constantly at how the Lord has prepared me for working here and just all the things that I get to do that I'm actually like, I'm good at that. I can do that.
Yeah.
There are so many tasks that come up that I'm like, oh yeah, I can do that. And so that's been really cool. I've told you this before. I don't know if I've ever told you this, but I still, like, over a year later, I'll walk down the hallway and just smile to myself because I'm like, wow, I can't believe I work here.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it happens all the time. I love being here. And something that I've been thinking about a lot lately is that there are quite a few things that I don't really know how to do, or like am not super familiar with, but I don't feel intimidated by them to the point of like, ooh, I shouldn't be here.
Right.
I want to learn how to do those things, and like I want to be here for a long time, and that is a different place than I felt even at the BSM. Sometimes there were things that I was like, I can't do that, and it would be almost crippling. But here I feel like I want to learn how to do that, and I don't know, I have a lot of hope for my progress. Like I want to learn, and I want to do this job well, and I want to serve this church well because they have loved me so well. But
Well, and so much of that seems too tied to, I obviously I love this place as well and think this is a great, this is an incredible church, incredible place to work, but that attitude of feeling like, no, I can lean into this, I can learn. Mm-hmm. That's not necessarily because of this place. That seems to me to be so much about the process that the Lord has brought you through in some of the hardest moments of your life, that your outlook and your perspective seem to be totally different on this side of those moments than maybe they were before. You think that is part of it?
Yeah, I guess I haven't really thought about it much. I don't know. Yeah, I think it does seem that I mean I've definitely grown a lot in my perspective, but I don't know. I guess I haven't really thought about that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Well, I'll let you know a little secret of two guys in their mid-30s pastoring a church. We feel that way too sometimes.
I think it's late 30s.
Are we? Yeah. It's somewhere in between mid to late.
Man.
Anyway,
man.
We're cool. Be
That's
cool,
right.
man.
Be cool.
But yeah, that uncertainty, but leaning into that and being excited to learn, I find myself in that often. So
yeah, that's cool. I wonder if I was thinking about this a couple months ago about February, that I was like, this would have been the time that I would be asking the Lord, like, okay, do I stay another year? But I was like, I don't have to do that. I don't feel the need to check in and ask the Lord, like, if I need to stick around. Like, I feel like I'm here for a while, and like maybe the Lord will bring me somewhere else one day, but hopefully not for at least 30 years.
That's right. You signed a 30-year contract.
We try to lock everybody down.
That's right. I try to go for 30s. Let me ask you this as we wrap up. I would love to just, somebody that, and we do this pretty often on the show, where we ask somebody that's walked through something, whatever it is, just for their perspective. If somebody were to come to them and they were to be really fresh in that journey of grief, and maybe grief, maybe loss, maybe just a moment where something unexpected has happened that's kind of caused them to go, I don't know, everything stopped. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. Having been through what you've walked through, what would you say to somebody that's just right there, fresh in the beginning of that journey?
Oh, wow. That's hard. I would probably say a lot of things, but I would probably be really honest. Like, this is going to be really hard.
Yeah.
But like you're going to be okay. That sounds kind of cheesy, but I don't know. Like, the Lord is going to provide for you. I've seen him provide over and over again, and so I like the Lord will provide even when it seems like there's nothing that could help.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. It's ironically, it's simple, Maddison.
Yeah.
Like you said that you needed. It's so simple,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's those very simple things that are profound and that get us through. So I appreciate that, man. I really appreciate you sharing your story with us as the most requested interview in podcast history. I know that those that are listening also certainly appreciate you sharing that with us. And look, if you want to see or hang out with Maddison, just come hang out with us over here at Fredonia
It's a cool
Hill.
place to be.
It's a cool place. We have been dubbed a cool place to be.
Just walk down all the way down the hallway, and you'll reach all three of us.
Yeah, that's right. You'll come hang out with all of us. So, hey, listen, if you have somebody you want us to interview, or really one of the most special things, certainly you can send those to us, those recommendations. Man, one of the most special things for us is to hear from you how these stories have impacted you. And want to just encourage you again, we do this, we try to do this really as much as we can, but just encourage you, man, sit down with the people that are in your world, in your sphere of influence. Take time out of your day invite somebody to coffee, to lunch, to your home for dinner, break bread together, whatever it is, take some time and ask somebody in your world some questions that give some space to share their story. Listen to what God is doing in one another's lives. We are encouraged every time we sit around this table. We're challenged by what the Lord is doing, and man, we grow closer to one another when we take time to listen to each other's stories. So thanks, Maddison, for sharing that with us. And we want to hear how that's impacted you. So if you want to reach out with a guest recommendation or testimony about this show, you can hit us up.
You can. At all the channels. All the ways.
Have you forgotten the email?
No. I was just trying to think of another way of saying it because I feel like I'm droning on about the email. But you can email us at stc@fredoniahill.org.
Hey, thanks for listening. We will see you next time. Adios.